They called us primitive,
Prepare for the final
barbaric,
approach. We must
a
secure the
species
sector
too violent
before the
and
window closes.
unpredictable to join the civilized galaxy. The Galactic Council's rejection wasn't just a political decision, it was a death sentence wrapped in diplomatic language. They expected humanity to fade quietly into the cosmic background, another failed species relegated to their single world. They were wrong. What the Council didn't understand was that rejection doesn't break humans, it forges them. Every no becomes fuel. Every closed door becomes a blueprint for building our own. They thought denying us a seat at their table would humble us. Instead, we built our own table. And it became bigger than theirs. This is the story of how humanity, spurned by an ancient galactic civilization, didn't just survive their rejection, we thrived beyond their wildest fears. We took their never and turned it into watch us. We took their certainty that we would fail and made it the foundation of an empire that would make them question everything they thought they knew about power, civilization, and what it truly means to be strong. The galaxy thought they knew humans. They were about to learn they knew nothing at all. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the crystalline assembly hall of the Galactic Council, her hand steady despite the weight of humanity's future resting on her shoulders. The massive chamber stretched impossibly high, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that translated the emotional states of the hundreds of alien delegates surrounding her. Right now, those patterns painted the walls in cold blues and dismissive grays. The Zephyrian Chancellor, a being of pure energy contained within an elaborate mechanical frame, spoke in harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. The translation implant in Sarah's ear converted the alien speech into crisp English. The species known as humanity has presented their case for membership in the Galactic Council. We have deliberated for 7 standard cycles. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. 7 cycles. 7 long months of waiting while alien civilizations debated whether humanity deserved a place among the stars. Behind her, the small delegation of Earth's finest scientists, diplomats, military officers stood in perfect formation. They had prepared for this moment for decades. The decision is unanimous, the Chancellor continued, and Sarah noticed how the bioluminescent walls shifted to a harsh red. Application denied. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah's training kept her face neutral, but, inside, something fundamental shifted. Around the chamber, alien delegates rustled, clicked, and hummed in what she now recognized as satisfaction. They were pleased with this decision. The primary concerns, began the Valkyrian representative, a spider-like creature with silver eyes, center around humanity's inherent violent tendencies. Your species' history shows an alarming pattern of warfare, genocide, and environmental destruction. The Council cannot risk introducing such instability into our peaceful confederation. A tall, ethereal being from the Arcturus system floated forward. The Arcturians were considered the most evolved species in the galaxy, having transcended physical warfare millennia ago. Furthermore, humanity lacks the necessary technological sophistication. Your faster-than-light travel is crude, your energy systems primitive, and your social structures chaotic. You simply do not meet the minimum requirements for galactic citizenship. Sarah found her voice, though it felt like speaking through broken glass. Honored delegates, humanity has made tremendous progress. We've ended major conflicts on our world, developed sustainable technologies, and demonstrated our capacity for growth. We're not asking to be handed power, we're asking for the opportunity to prove ourselves as contributing members of the galactic community. The Chancellor's mechanical frame buzzed with what sounded like electronic laughter. Prove yourselves? Child species, you have had 50,000 years of recorded history. In that time, you have not achieved a single century without warfare. The Galactic Council represents over 4 billion years of collected wisdom and peace. We will not jeopardize that for a species that cannot control its own destructive impulses. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward. Respected beings, our very nature, our ability to adapt, to survive, to overcome challenges, these traits that you call violent could be assets to the Council. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, and global wars. We've rebuilt civilizations from ashes. That resilience, that determination, surely has value? A crystalline being from the Rigel system spoke, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. Your resilience comes from your inability to maintain peace. Civilized species do not require such traits because civilized species do not create situations that require survival instincts. Your proposal only reinforces our conclusion that humanity is fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. The rejection wasn't just political, it was philosophical. These beings saw humanity's greatest strengths as unforgivable flaws. What humans called courage, they labeled aggression. What humans called determination, they dismissed as stubborn violence. Sarah looked around the chamber one more time. Representatives of over 3,000 species filled the space, beings of impossible beauty and complexity. Some existed as pure thought, others as living metals, still others as sentient gases. They had built wonders, cities that floated in gas-giant atmospheres, megastructures that harvested energy from entire stars, networks of consciousness that spanned galaxies. They had achieved everything humanity dreamed of and more. And they looked at humans like dangerous children playing with fire. The decision is final, the Chancellor announced. Humanity is forbidden from establishing colonies beyond your solar system. Any attempt to violate this restriction will be met with appropriate measures. Your species will remain quarantined on Earth until such time as you demonstrate the capacity for true civilization. General Patricia Morrison, the Earth Defense Force's highest-ranking officer, spoke quietly but clearly. And who decides when we've demonstrated this capacity? What are the criteria? How long must we wait? The Arcturian representative's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. When your species has maintained global peace for at least 1,000 standard years, when you have eliminated poverty and want, when you have transcended your primitive emotional responses, then, perhaps the Council might reconsider. But, understand, no species has ever been granted a second hearing. This decision shapes the next phase of humanity's existence. 1,000 years. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Human civilizations rose and fell in less time than that. The delegates were essentially saying never. As the formal dismissal began, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Not despair, not anger, but a strange sense of clarity. She looked at her fellow humans, Webb with his insatiable curiosity, Morrison with her tactical brilliance, the engineers and scientists and diplomats who had worked tirelessly to reach this moment. They weren't broken by this rejection. If anything, she could see a familiar spark in their eyes. Humans had been underestimated before. The history of her species was written by those who had been told they couldn't, shouldn't, or wouldn't. Every major human achievement had come in defiance of someone's certainty that it was impossible. The delegation was escorted from the chamber by beings of living light that served as the Council's security forces. As they walked through corridors that defied geometry, past windows that showed impossible vistas of nebulae and star clusters, Sarah found herself making mental notes. The artificial gravity was generated by what appeared to be rotating gravity wells. The translation technology used quantum entanglement to process meaning rather than just words. The energy systems tapped directly into zero-point fields. All of it was beyond current human understanding. But understanding could be learned. Technology could be developed. What couldn't be taught was the human refusal to accept limitations. Back aboard their ship, the Earth delegation sat in silence for long minutes. The vessel itself was a testament to human ingenuity built from salvaged alien technology, powered by a fusion system that shouldn't have worked but did because human engineers refused to accept theoretical limitations. So, Dr. Webb finally said, "That went well." Despite everything, Morrison laughed. Could have been worse. They could have decided we were a threat worth eliminating. Maybe they should have, Sarah said quietly. Everyone looked at her, and she realized she had spoken her thoughts aloud. I mean, maybe they made a mistake. They're so focused on our potential for violence that they're blind to our potential for growth. They see our history of conflict and assume that's all we are. But they're missing something crucial. Which is? Webb asked. Sarah stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Galactic Council's home system. Massive orbital habitats circled a binary star, each one home to billions of beings living in perfect harmony. It was beautiful, peaceful, and utterly static. They've forgotten that conflict drives evolution. They've achieved perfect order, perfect peace, perfect stagnation. When was the last time any of these civilizations had a breakthrough innovation? When did they last solve a problem they'd never encountered before? They've been coast for millions of years on achievements their ancestors made when they were still primitive like us. Morrison joined her at the viewport. You're saying they're afraid of us not because we're violent, but because we're dynamic? I'm saying they looked at humanity and saw everything they used to be before they became this. Perfect. Peaceful. Predictable. Sarah turned back to her team. They want us to become like them before they'll accept us. But what if we don't want to become like them? What if humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy isn't our potential to join their civilization, but our potential to offer an alternative? The idea that would reshape the galaxy was born in that moment, born from rejection and watered by human stubbornness. They couldn't join the Galactic Council, so they would build something better. They couldn't be accepted into galactic civilization, so they would create their own. Webb was already pulling up star charts, his scientific mind racing with possibilities. The Council's prohibition only covers territorial expansion beyond our solar system. It doesn't say anything about trade agreements with non-Council species, about providing services to independent worlds, about helping other species that might be frustrated with Council oversight. You're talking about building a parallel power structure, Morrison said, her strategic mind immediately grasping the implications. Not challenging the Council directly, but creating an alternative that might prove more attractive to species seeking growth rather than stagnation. Sarah nodded. The rejection that was meant to humble humanity had instead revealed their path forward. They would take every lesson learned from the Council's technology, every connection made during their time in Council space, every species they had met who seemed less than perfectly satisfied with galactic civilization. The Council thinks they've contained humanity, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word. They think denying us membership will keep us small and irrelevant. They're about to learn why you should never tell a human something is impossible. As their ship began its journey back to Earth, none of them realized they had just taken the first steps toward creating something that would eclipse the Galactic Council itself. The rejection that was meant to end humanity's dreams had instead lit a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The Council had made their decision. Now humanity would make theirs. 3 years after the rejection, Captain Lisa Rodriguez guided her modified freighter through the asteroid fields of the Kepler system, 27 light-years from Earth. Officially, no human ships operated beyond the solar system. Unofficially, humanity had become the galaxy's most successful smugglers, traders, and problem solvers. The ship, christened Defiance, looked like nothing special from the outside, a battered cargo hauler that had seen better decades. Inside, it contained technology that would make Council engineers weep with envy. Human innovation, freed from the constraints of trying to fit into galactic society, had exploded in directions no one had anticipated. Captain, called out her communications officer, a young man named Tony Park, we're getting the signal from our contact on Kepler 442b. Lisa nodded. Kepler 442b was officially a Council-administered world, home to the Thylaurians, a species of crystalline beings who had been Council members for over 10,000 years. Unofficially, the Thylaurians were deeply frustrated with Council oversight of their mining operations and had reached out through carefully obscured channels to hire human consultants. Put them through encrypted channel. The holographic projection that appeared in the center of the bridge showed Thylaurian mining director ZYX Tal, whose crystalline structure pulsed with the deep blues that indicated stress. Captain Rodriguez, I trust your journey was unmonitored? Lisa smiled. In the 3 years since the rejection, humans had become experts at avoiding Council surveillance. It helped that Council security was designed to detect the energy signatures of known galactic technologies, not the hybrid systems humans had cobbled together from salvaged alien tech and Earth innovation. Clean as Starlight, Director. We've got the equipment you requested, plus a few innovations our engineers thought you might find interesting. The Thylaurians had approached humanity with a problem that perfectly illustrated why the Council's rigid approach was failing. Their world's unique crystalline ore could be mined efficiently, but only with techniques that caused minor seismic activity. The Council's environmental protocols forbade any mining method that caused planetary disruption, even minimal amounts. The result was that the Thylaurians could only extract a fraction of their world's mineral wealth, while their population grew and their needs increased. The Council's solution was to resettle surplus Thylaurian population to other worlds and accept reduced mining output. It was neat, orderly, and completely ignored what the Thylaurians actually wanted. Humanity's approach was different. Human engineers had studied the problem and developed a mining system that used controlled micro-explosions to fracture the ore deposits. Yes, it caused minor seismic activity. But it also allowed the Thylaurians to extract 10 times more ore than Council-approved methods, and the seismic effects could be channeled and controlled to actually strengthen the planet's geological stability. It was exactly the kind of solution the Council would never approve: too risky, too innovative, too willing to accept short-term disruption for long-term benefit. The preliminary tests were successful? Lisa asked as her crew began unloading the specialized mining equipment. ZYXTL's structure brightened to an excited yellow. Beyond our most optimistic projections. Your engineers' modifications to our extraction systems have increased yield by 847% while actually improving geological stability. The Council's mining experts insisted such results were impossible. That's because Council experts have forgotten how to take calculated risks, Lisa replied. They're so focused on avoiding any possibility of failure that they've lost the ability to achieve breakthrough success. As the cargo transfer continued, Lisa reflected on how much humanity had learned in just 3 years of operating outside Council oversight. The rejection that was meant to isolate them had instead forced humans to become incredibly resourceful. Unable to rely on Council infrastructure, they had built their own networks. Unable to access Council markets, they had created alternatives. And species throughout the galaxy were taking notice. The Thylaurians were just one example. In the past year alone, human consulting operations had helped the Rigelian colonies develop new atmospheric processors, assisted the Centauri Mining Guild with breakthrough extraction techniques, and provided the Vega Trading Consortium with logistics solutions that increased their profit margins by 300%. Every success created more opportunities. Word spread through the galaxy's informal networks that humans could solve problems the Council couldn't or wouldn't address. More importantly, humans were willing to work with species that the Council considered troublesome or nonconformist. "Captain," Park called out, "we're getting a priority signal from Earth Command." Lisa frowned. Priority signals were rare and usually meant something significant had happened. Transfer the Thylaurian payment to the secure account and finish the cargo transfer. Then, set course for the rendezvous point. 6 hours later, the Defiance met up with the heavy cruiser Determination at a seemingly empty point in space. The cruiser had been built in secret in the outer system, using resources from the asteroid belt and technology that officially didn't exist. Admiral Morrison, now head of Earth's Shadow Fleet, appeared on the communication screen. "Lisa, we need to talk. We've just received intelligence that changes everything." Lisa transported over to the cruiser, leaving her first officer in charge of the Defiance. She found Morrison in the ship's conference room, along with Dr. Webb and Ambassador Chen, who now served as Director of External Relations for humanity's unofficial galactic presence. "What's the situation?" Lisa asked, taking a seat. Sarah Chen activated a holographic display showing a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red dots marked Council worlds, while blue dots showed human operations. Green dots indicated species that had requested human assistance but hadn't yet committed to formal relationships. "We've been monitoring Council communications," Chen said. 3 days ago, they held an emergency session. The topic was humanity. Lisa felt a chill. "They know about our operations?" "They know, but that's not the problem," Morrison said. "The problem is that 17 different species have formally petitioned the Council to reconsider humanity's application status." Webb leaned forward, his excitement obvious. "It's unprecedented. In 4 billion years of Council history, no species has ever generated this kind of advocacy from other members. The Thylaurians, Rigelians, Centaurians, even some of the founding species, they're all arguing that humanity brings unique value to the galactic community. Which terrifies the Council leadership," Chen continued. "They're facing something they never expected, their own members questioning their decision. The petitions aren't just about humanity. They're about whether the Council's approach to galactic civilization is still working. Lisa studied the map, noting how human operations had spread throughout local space. What had started as desperation-driven smuggling had evolved into something much larger. They see us as a threat to their authority. Worse, Morrison said grimly. They see us as proof that their way isn't the only way. For 4 billion years, the Council has maintained order by convincing everyone that their methods are the only path to advanced civilization. Humanity is demonstrating that there are alternatives. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just built a successful underground network, they had accidentally created the foundation for a new form of galactic organization. One based on innovation rather than stagnation, growth rather than maintenance, cooperation rather than oversight. What's the Council's response? Lisa asked. Chen's expression darkened. They're considering what they call containment measures. The exact details are classified, but our sources suggest they're planning to enforce the quarantine more aggressively. They might try to shut down all human operations beyond the solar system. And if that doesn't work? Then, they might decide humanity poses a fundamental threat to galactic stability, Morrison said quietly. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had reached a crossroads. They could retreat, abandon their growing galactic network, and accept isolation. Or they could push forward and risk open conflict with the most powerful organization in the galaxy. There's another option, Webb said suddenly. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? What if the Council's opposition isn't a problem to solve, but an opportunity to seize? Explain, Chen said. Webb stood and began pacing, his mind clearly racing. The Council maintains power through consent. Species join because they believe Council membership offers the best path to prosperity and security. But what if there was an alternative? What if species could choose between Council membership and something else? Morrison frowned. You're talking about creating a rival to the Galactic Council. That's not just ambitious, it's necessary, Lisa interrupted, suddenly understanding. Webb's right. We've been thinking small. We've been focusing on our immediate operations, but the real opportunity is systematic. We're not just helping individual species solve problems. We're demonstrating an entirely different approach to galactic civilization. Chen studied the holographic map again, but this time she was seeing it differently. Not as scattered human operations, but as the foundation of a new kind of galactic organization. A confederation based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchical control. Innovation rather than regulation. Growth rather than stability. It would mean abandoning any hope of Council acceptance, Morrison warned. Once we take this step, there's no going back. We'd be committing humanity to a path that ends either in success beyond our wildest dreams or in total destruction. Lisa thought about the Phylorians, working in their crystal mines with new human technology, achieving prosperity they'd never dreamed possible under Council oversight. She thought about the Rigelian colonies, breathing easier thanks to human atmospheric innovations. She thought about the dozens of species who had reached out to humanity not because they wanted to join something, but because they wanted to build something. The Council rejected us because they thought we were too primitive to join galactic civilization, she said finally. Maybe they were right. Maybe we are too primitive to join their civilization. But maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs, someone primitive enough to remember that civilization should serve people, not the other way around. The decision was made in that moment, though none of them fully realized it yet. Humanity would not retreat. They would not compromise. They would take the network they had built and transform it into something the galaxy had never seen before. A human empire built on the radical idea that the galaxy's species should be free to choose their own path. The Council had forced humanity to choose between submission and independence. They were about to learn that humans always choose independence. The Nexus station hung in the void between star systems, a massive construction that officially didn't exist. Built over 18 months using resources and labor from a dozen species, it served as the secret heart of what was becoming known throughout the galaxy as the Human Alliance, though its membership was far from exclusively human. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the station's central amphitheater, looking out at representatives from 47 different species. Some she recognized from humanity's early diplomatic efforts, the Thylorians with their crystalline structures now pulsing with confident golds, the Rigelians whose gas-formed bodies swirled with excitement, the practical Centaurians whose rock-like appearance hid remarkably innovative minds. Others were newer arrivals, species that had quietly withdrawn from council worlds over the past months. The Zerani, whose plant-like forms required specific atmospheric conditions the council considered non-standard. The Corvashi, a warrior species the council had been trying to pacify for centuries. The Zephyrans, energy beings who chafed under council restrictions on their natural electromagnetic abilities. What united them wasn't species or ideology. It was frustration with the council's rigid approach to galactic civilization and excitement about alternatives. Elena activated the holographic display at the center of the amphitheater. The image showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with Council space marked in red and Alliance territory marked in blue. The Alliance had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. "Friends," Elena began, using the standard Alliance greeting that had evolved naturally among member species, "we've reached a critical juncture. Our intelligence networks report that the Council is planning what they call Operation Harmony, a systematic effort to eliminate unauthorized governance structures throughout the galaxy." A rumble of concern passed through the assembled delegates. The Corvashi representative, War Leader Thax, stood to his full 3-meter height. Honored Elena, the Corvashi did not flee Council space to hide in shadows. If the Council wishes war, they shall have it. And that's exactly what they're hoping for, Elena replied calmly. The Council's strategy is to provoke us into open aggression. If we attack first, they can justify extreme measures to protect galactic stability. They want us to become the violent primitives they've always claimed we are. Ambassador Vintar of the Zerani stretched her vine-like appendages, and what Elena had learned was their species' equivalent of a thoughtful nod. The human speaks wisdom. The Council seeks to force us into their narrative. We must write our own. The past 2 years had taught humanity invaluable lessons about galactic politics. The Council maintained power not through military might, though they had that, but through the widespread belief that they represented the only viable path to advanced civilization. Most species joined the Council not because they were conquered, but because they were convinced. Humanity's approach was different. Instead of demanding allegiance, they offered partnership. Instead of imposing standards, they helped species achieve their own goals. Instead of requiring conformity, they celebrated diversity. The results spoke for themselves. Alliance territory now controlled nearly 30% of the galaxy's most resource-rich systems. More importantly, Alliance worlds were showing innovation and growth rates that Council worlds hadn't seen in millennia. "I've called this assembly," Elena continued, "because we need to make a fundamental decision about our future. We can continue growing quietly, hoping to avoid Council attention until we're too large to eliminate. Or we can take a step that will change the nature of galactic civilization forever." She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a document. The text appeared in over 40 languages simultaneously, translated by the advanced linguistic AI that had become one of the Alliance's greatest achievements. "The Galactic Charter of Free Worlds," Elena announced. "A formal declaration that any species has the right to choose their own path to civilization. That progress comes through innovation, not regulation. That the galaxy is large enough for multiple approaches to prosperity and peace." The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate understood the implications. This wasn't just a document, it was a declaration of independence from Council authority. Once signed, there would be no pretending the Alliance was merely an informal network of trading partners. Zyxtal of the Thylorians was the first to speak. "The humans have shown us wonders we never imagined possible. Our world prospers as never before. Our people have opportunities our ancestors only dreamed of. If signing this document means defending that prosperity, then Lilos will sign." The Rigelian delegates' gaseous forms swirled with determined patterns. "The Rigelian colonies have watched our people flourish under Alliance partnership. We vote to sign." One by one, the delegates voiced their support. Not unanimous, 7 species requested time to consult their governments, but overwhelming. 40 species committed to a path that would reshape the galaxy. As the formal signing ceremony proceeded, Elena received a priority communication from Earth. Admiral Morrison's image appeared in her private comm link, her expression grim. "Elena, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive Council fleet moving toward Alliance space. 300 ships, including 12 of their planet-killer dreadnoughts." Elena's blood chilled. Planet killers were the Council's ultimate weapon, massive vessels capable of sterilizing entire worlds. In 4 billion years, they had been used exactly twice, both times to eliminate species the Council deemed fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. "How long until they reach us?" 6 days, maybe 7 if we're lucky." Elena closed the communication and returned to the signing ceremony. The charter was nearly complete, but now it had taken on desperate urgency. They weren't just declaring independence, they were doing so in the face of potential extinction. As the last signature was added to the charter, Elena stepped forward to address the assembly one final time. "Friends, I have just received word that the Council is moving against us with overwhelming force. They intend to end the Alliance before it can truly begin." The declaration sent ripples of shock through the amphitheater, but Elena was proud to see that none of the delegates fled or withdrew their signatures. Whatever else the Alliance had accomplished, it had attracted species with genuine courage. However, Elena continued, the Council has made a critical miscalculation. They're approaching this as a traditional conflict, overwhelming force against a weaker opponent. But the Alliance isn't traditional. We're not going to meet them in conventional battle. War leader Thax leaned forward. "What do you propose?" Elena activated a new holographic display, this one showing tactical information that few beings outside the Alliance leadership had ever seen. For the past year, human engineers have been working with Corvashi warriors, Zerani biotechnicians, Thylorian crystal shapers, and specialists from dozens of other species. "We've been developing something the galaxy has never seen before." The display showed schematic drawings of ships unlike anything in Council or Alliance fleets. They were smaller than traditional warships but packed with technology that pushed the boundaries of physics. "Adaptive vessels," Elena explained. "Ships that can reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements. Each one incorporates innovations from every Alliance species. Corvashi weapons systems that can punch through anything the Council has ever built. Zerani bioarmor that can heal battle damage in real time. Thylorian crystal matrices that make the ships essentially invisible to Council sensors." Dr. Webb, who had been working on the project since its inception, appeared via hologram from the secure facility where the ships were being built. "We've completed construction of 47 adaptive vessels, plus support craft. It's not enough to match the Council fleet in raw numbers, but numbers aren't everything." Elena looked around the amphitheater at the faces of beings who had committed everything to this moment. "The Council expects us to fight like them, massive fleets in formal battle lines, victory through overwhelming force. Instead, we're going to fight like humans." "Which means?" asked the Zerani ambassador. Elena smiled. "We're going to cheat." The next 6 days passed in a blur of desperate preparation. Alliance worlds across the galaxy received the news of the Council's approach and began implementing evacuation protocols. But, instead of fleeing in panic, the response revealed just how much the Alliance had accomplished. Thylorian crystal shapers worked around the clock to create sensor-blocking fields around key installations. Rigelian atmospheric specialists generated massive ion storms that would interfere with Council navigation. Zerani bioengineers released clouds of microscopic organisms that would attach to Council ships and disrupt their energy systems. Most importantly, every Alliance species contributed something to the fleet that would face the Council. Not just ships and weapons, but ideas. Tactics that no single species would have conceived but that emerged naturally from the collaboration the Alliance represented. On Nexus Station, Elena stood in the command center alongside representatives from every Alliance species. Through the viewports, she could see the adaptive vessels preparing for departure. Each ship was a testament to what the galaxy could achieve when species worked together as equals rather than subjects. "Council fleet has dropped out of hyperspace," reported the tactical officer, a young human woman named Captain Sarah Kim. "They're maintaining standard formation, dreadnoughts at the center, escort vessels and protective shells around them." Elena studied the tactical display. The Council fleet was impressive, 300 ships arrayed with mathematical precision, their combined firepower capable of devastating entire star systems. It was exactly what she had expected. It was also exactly what she had hoped for. All Alliance vessels, this is command. Execute Operation Liberation. The adaptive vessels didn't form up in traditional battle lines. Instead, they scattered across the system in seemingly random patterns, each ship following its own course toward different sectors of the Council formation. To the Council commanders, it must have looked like panic. A desperate, uncoordinated retreat by an inferior force. They were about to learn that humans had taught the galaxy a new way to wage war. Admiral Zektherin of the Galactic Council surveyed his fleet with satisfaction as they emerged from hyperspace in the Kepler system. 300 vessels of the most advanced civilization in galactic history, arranged in perfect formation, moving with the precision that came from millions of years of military evolution. The Council had ended conflicts before they truly began for longer than most species had existed. Today would be no different. Admiral, reported his sensor operator, a crystalline Arcturus native whose computational abilities were legendary, were detecting multiple contacts throughout the system. Estimated 40 to 50 vessels, dispersed in non-standard patterns. Zektherin studied the tactical display with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. The human fleet, if it could be called a fleet, was scattered across the system like debris from an explosion. No formation, no coordination, no apparent strategy beyond chaos. Primitive, he muttered. Alert all vessels to maintain formation. We'll demonstrate proper military doctrine to these barbarians before we eliminate them. The Council fleet advanced in textbook formation, dreadnoughts providing massive firepower while surrounded by protective screens of cruisers and destroyers. It was a formation that had dominated galactic conflicts for eons, perfected through countless battles against species foolish enough to challenge Council authority. What happened next defied every tactical manual in Council military history. The Alliance vessels didn't engage the Council fleet directly. Instead, they seemed to phase in and out of existence, appearing just long enough to strike at seemingly random targets before vanishing again. Zektherin watched in confusion as his sensors lost and reacquired the same ships dozens of times. What are they doing? He demanded. Unknown, Admiral. Their vessels appear to be using some form of adaptive stealth technology. They're modifying their energy signatures faster than our targeting systems can compensate. Meanwhile, aboard the Alliance command ship Liberation, Captain Maria Santos watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The adaptive vessels were performing exactly as designed, their human-engineered chaos protocols confusing Council targeting systems while their alien-designed weapon systems found weaknesses in Council defenses that shouldn't have existed. Status report, Maria called out. All vessels operational, reported her tactical officer. Phase 1 complete. Council formation is beginning to show strain as they try to track our movements. The beauty of the Alliance strategy was its mathematical impossibility. Traditional space combat relied on predictable patterns, ships moved in formations, fired weapons along expected vectors, used standardized defensive screens. Council computers had been programmed to counter every known tactical doctrine. But the Alliance wasn't using known tactics. They were using human tactics, warfare based on unpredictability, adaptation, and the willingness to accept calculated risks that no sane military computer would approve. A Thylorian crystal ship materialized directly inside the Council formation, its crystalline hull somehow having passed through the energy barriers that should have stopped it. Before the Council ships could react, the crystal ship fired weapons that resonated at the specific frequency needed to shatter Arcturian defensive shields. A Corvashi war vessel appeared above a Council dreadnought and deployed weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate the massive ship's armor. But Corvashi metallurgy, enhanced with human innovation, had created projectiles that could adapt their molecular structure in flight. Zorani bioships phased through Council hulls like ghosts, leaving behind microscopic organisms that began converting the ship's own metal into explosive compounds. This is impossible, Zektherin whispered as he watched his perfect formation dissolve into chaos. Their technology readings are primitive. Their ships are smaller than our escort vessels. How are they? His question was answered when a human adaptive vessel materialized directly in front of his command ship's bridge. For a moment, he could see the human captain through the transparent aluminum of both bridges, a young woman with determined eyes who raised her hand in what he realized was a gesture of greeting. Then, the human ship fired. But, instead of conventional weapons, the ship deployed something that made Zektheron's blood freeze. It was a device that shouldn't have existed, couldn't have been built with any known technology. A contained singularity, no larger than a marble, that began devouring his ship's forward armor. All vessels, retreat to Zektheron began, but his command was cut short as the bridge's atmosphere began venting into space. Across the battle zone, the story was the same. Council vessels found themselves facing weapons and tactics that had never appeared in their databases. Every Alliance ship fought differently, using combinations of technology that shouldn't have been possible. The mathematical precision that had made the Council fleet invincible for eons became a liability when facing opponents who refused to follow mathematical rules. Admiral Morrison, watching the battle from Nexus Station, smiled as she saw the Council formation finally break. Sometimes the best way to win isn't to be stronger. It's to be impossible. Within 3 hours, the engagement was over. Of the Council's 300 vessels, fewer than 50 remained operational. The survivors fled toward Council space, carrying with them news that would shake the Galactic Order to its foundations. The Alliance had lost 6 vessels and suffered damage to 12 others. By any traditional measure, it was the most lopsided victory in Galactic military history. But the real victory wasn't military. It was philosophical. For 4 billion years, the Galactic Council had maintained order by convincing the galaxy that their way was the only way. That advanced civilizations fought wars with massive fleets and overwhelming force. That primitive species couldn't possibly challenge advanced ones. Humanity and its allies had just proved all of that wrong. In the aftermath of the battle, as Alliance teams worked to repair damaged vessels and rescue survivors from both sides, Elena Vasquez received a communication that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. The source was the Galactic Council itself. The holographic image that appeared in her command center showed Chancellor Vorthak, the energy being who had led the Council for over 10,000 years. For the first time in recorded history, a Council Chancellor was speaking directly to leaders of a rebel faction. "I am Vorthak of the Galactic Council," the being said, his harmonics showing deep uncertainty. "I request communication with the leadership of the Human Alliance." Elena studied the Chancellor's energy patterns, noting the fear and confusion that he was unable to hide. "I am Director Elena Vasquez of the Alliance of Free Worlds." "I'm listening." "Your forces have achieved an unexpected outcome. The Council requires clarification of your intentions." For a moment, Elena was tempted to gloat. The beings who had rejected humanity as primitive barbarians were now forced to treat them as equals. But gloating wasn't the human way, at least, not when there was more important work to be done. "Our intentions are exactly what we stated in our charter," Elena replied. "We seek the right of all species to choose their own path to civilization. We have no desire to conquer or control. We simply refuse to be conquered or controlled." The Chancellor's form flickered with what might have been confusion. "You do not seek to replace the Council? To claim dominion over Council space?" "We seek to offer an alternative to Council membership," Elena said. "Any species that wishes to remain under Council authority is free to do so. Any species that prefers alliance partnership is equally free to make that choice." The concept seemed almost incomprehensible to the Chancellor. For billions of years, galactic politics had been binary: either a species submitted to Council authority or it was eliminated as a threat. The idea of parallel civilizations coexisting was outside their experience. This alternative, it threatens the stability that the Council has maintained for eons. Elena nodded. "Yes, it does. Stability built on stagnation is no real stability at all. Growth requires change, and change requires the freedom to choose different paths." As the communication ended, Elena realized that humanity had achieved something even more significant than military victory. They had forced the most powerful organization in the galaxy to acknowledge that alternatives to their authority could exist. The war was far from over. The Council would not simply accept the existence of the Alliance without attempting to destroy it through other means. Economic warfare, diplomatic pressure, covert operations, there were countless ways they might try to eliminate the threat to their supremacy. But something fundamental had changed. The Alliance had proved that Council forces could be defeated, that Council technology could be countered, that Council authority could be challenged successfully. More importantly, they had demonstrated that innovation could triumph over tradition, that cooperation could overcome domination, that the galaxy's future didn't have to be dictated by its past. As news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, species that had never considered alternatives to Council membership began asking new questions. If the humans could build something different, something better, then maybe change was possible. Maybe the galaxy's greatest days lay ahead, not behind. The Council had tried to eliminate the Alliance through force. Instead, they had given it the one thing it needed most, proof that the impossible was possible. And humans had always specialized in the impossible. 10 years after the Battle of Kepler, Ambassador Sarachin stood before the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. The Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Station, now expanded to accommodate representatives from over 300 species, buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages as beings who had never imagined meeting as equals worked together to forge the galaxy's future. The changes had been extraordinary. What began as a desperate human network of smugglers and problem solvers had evolved into something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed authority. The Alliance of Free Worlds now encompassed nearly half the galaxy, with new species joining every month. But the most remarkable change wasn't territorial. It was philosophical. Friends, Sarah began, using the greeting that had become standard throughout Alliance space, we gather today to celebrate not just the 10th anniversary of our first victory, but the transformation of what galactic civilization can mean. She gestured to the viewing ports that showed the incredible vista outside. Nexus Station had grown from a hidden outpost to a massive complex that served as the Alliance's diplomatic and commercial heart. Ships from hundreds of species docked at its facilities, not just Alliance members, but Council vessels as well. The Galactic Council still existed, still controlled vast regions of space, but it was no longer the galaxy's only option. Species could choose between Council membership with its stability and order, or Alliance partnership with its freedom and innovation. Many chose to maintain relationships with both, creating a complex web of interstellar relations that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. The Thylorians have increased their mineral production by over 2,000% while improving their environmental conditions, Sarah continued. The Rigelian colonies have developed atmospheric technologies that are now being shared freely with any species that needs them. The Korvashi have channeled their warrior traditions into exploration and discovery, mapping regions of the galaxy that were previously unknown. Each success story represented something that would have been impossible under the old system. The Council's rigid hierarchy and standardized approaches had maintained order, but at the cost of stifling the very innovation that drove progress. But our greatest achievement, Sarah said, isn't what we've built. It's what we've proved. We've shown that diversity is not a problem to be managed, but a resource to be celebrated. That cooperation achieves more than control. That the galaxy is vast enough for multiple paths to prosperity. In the audience, Elena Vasquez smiled as she watched her former colleague address the assembly. Elena now served as Director of Innovation, overseeing research projects that combined knowledge from dozens of species. The breakthroughs had been staggering faster-than-light communications that allowed real-time conversations across the galaxy, energy systems that could tap directly into stellar cores, medical technologies that could extend lifespans across species barriers. None of it would have been possible under the Council's approach, which discouraged species from sharing their most advanced technologies with others. The Alliance's open-source philosophy had created a feedback loop of innovation that was accelerating exponentially. We face challenges, Sarah continued, her tone becoming more serious. There are species that reject both Council and Alliance approaches, preferring isolation. There are regions of the galaxy where conflicts continue. There are questions about governance, about resource allocation, about how to balance individual species needs with galactic cooperation. The challenges were real and significant. The Alliance's voluntary nature, while its greatest strength, also created complexities that the Council's hierarchical system had avoided. Decisions took longer when everyone had a voice. Conflicts required negotiation rather than arbitration. Growth was sometimes messy rather than orderly. But the Alliance had learned to see these as features, not bugs. The messiness of democracy was preferable to the sterility of autocracy. The inefficiencies of cooperation were worth it for the innovations they produced. However, Sarah said, we have something the galaxy has never had before: hope. She activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Alliance space was marked in blue, Council space in red, and neutral territory in green. What was remarkable wasn't the territorial divisions, but how they interacted. Trade routes connected all three regions. Diplomatic exchanges occurred regularly. Species moved freely between different systems. For the first time in galactic history, Sarah explained, civilizations with fundamentally different approaches to governance are coexisting peacefully. Council worlds provide stability for species that value order. Alliance worlds offer innovation for species that value growth. Neutral territories give space for species that value independence. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been conflicts, misunderstandings, and moments when war seemed inevitable. But each crisis had been resolved through negotiation rather than force, creating precedents for peaceful coexistence that grew stronger with each success. Admiral Morrison, now head of Alliance Defense Forces, stood to address the Assembly. 10 years ago, the Council told us that our nature made us incompatible with galactic civilization. They were right, we were incompatible with their civilization. So we built our own. The audience erupted in applause, the various species equivalent of applause, at least. Thylorians pulsed with bright colors, Rigelians swirled in complex patterns, Corvashi drummed their weapons against their armor, and dozens of other species added their own expressions of approval. But the greatest vindication, Morrison continued, came 3 years ago when Council Chancellor Vorthak requested Alliance assistance with the Andromeda Crisis. The Andromeda Crisis had been the ultimate test of the new galactic order. A massive alien probe from outside the galaxy had appeared near Council space, its technology so advanced that it defied analysis. The Council's traditional response would have been to destroy it as a threat, but the probe was too powerful for their weapons to affect. Instead, for the first time in their history, the Council had asked for help. The Alliance response had been swift and comprehensive. Species that had never worked with the Council before volunteered their expertise. Zerani bioengineers analyzed the probe's organic components. Thylorian crystal shapers studied its energy patterns. Human hackers working with Council cybernetics experts eventually established communication with the probe's intelligence. What they discovered changed everything. The probe wasn't a weapon or an invasion scout. It was a refugee, the last remnant of a civilization that had been destroyed by forces beyond the galactic rim. It carried the collected knowledge of its creators and was seeking a place where that knowledge could survive. The Joint Council Alliance response had been to welcome the probe and integrate its knowledge into galactic civilization. The technological breakthroughs that resulted benefited everyone, Council and Alliance members alike. That crisis proved something crucial, Morrison said. When faced with a challenge beyond any single civilization's ability to handle, cooperation achieved what neither hierarchy nor democracy could accomplish alone. As the formal speeches concluded and the assembly moved into smaller working groups, Sarah found herself on the station's observation deck, looking out at the incredible vista of ships representing hundreds of species. Dr. Webb joined her, as she had expected he would. "Regrets?" he asked, settling into a chair designed for human physiology. Sarah considered the question. 10 years ago, she had been a failed ambassador representing a rejected species. Today, she was helping to guide a galactic civilization that was achieving things she had never dreamed possible. "None," she said finally. "The Council's rejection was the best thing that ever happened to humanity." Webb laughed. "Because it forced us to become something better than they were. Because it forced us to remember what we really are," Sarah corrected. The Council looked at human history and saw violence and chaos. But what they missed was that all that conflict drove us to become better. Every war taught us the value of peace. Every failure taught us the importance of cooperation. Every challenge taught us that the impossible just takes longer. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as a massive Council dreadnought docked alongside an Alliance crystal ship. The two vessels represented completely different approaches to civilization, yet their crews would soon be working together on joint research projects. What do you think comes next? Webb asked. Sarah smiled. I think the galaxy is about to discover what happens when you give humans and their friends unlimited room to grow. As if in response to her words, a new ship appeared at the edge of the system unlike anything either of them had seen before. It was clearly Alliance-built, but it incorporated design elements from at least a dozen species, including some they couldn't immediately identify. Exploration Vessel Pioneer, came the communication from the new ship. Requesting docking permission. We've just returned from the Magellanic Clouds with some very interesting news. Sarah and Webb exchanged glances. The Magellanic Clouds were outside the galaxy entirely, a journey that should have taken centuries even with the most advanced faster-than-light technology. Permission granted, Sarah replied. We're very interested to hear what you found. As the Pioneer approached the station, Sarah realized that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had transformed their corner of the galaxy, proved that cooperation could achieve more than control, and created a civilization based on hope rather than fear. But the universe was vast, filled with wonders and challenges that hadn't even been imagined yet. And now they had the tools, the allies, and the experience to explore it all. The Council had rejected humanity because they thought humans were too primitive for galactic civilization. They had no idea how right they were and how wrong. Humans were too primitive for the old civilization. But they were exactly what was needed to build a new one. As the Pioneer docked and its crew prepared to share news of civilizations beyond the galaxy itself, Sarachan smiled. The adventure that began with rejection was becoming something beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And this was just the beginning.